Hello everyone, today we're going to be covering an alternative approach to using Elasticsearch and the Searchkick gem in your Rails app. So this will allow you to have that fancy search we covered in a previous video, but thankfully we had an email come in from Alexander that covers a 4-step process for getting this running, which is a lot easier than the WSL setup we had to do, and this will also work cross-platform, which will help for a lot of the issues people are running into in Mac land and Linux land. Now, that said, I have one or two important things to note here. Even in this email, it seems like the Elasticsearch version being used is like a full version behind. I noticed a lot of people were running into issues, and it looks like there's some like OS support issues where on Windows I could run version 8 just fine, but on other operating systems, for some reason, they prefer version 7, so some people seem to be downgrading. So that is something to take a look at. Maybe that's where your version or where your issues are running into. But in this case, because it's Docker, it'll be super easy to set up. So this is what we're going to create. It's just a like real-time search. You can, anytime you hit search, it just pops the stuff in without refreshing. It's just doing a turbo frame replace right here. So that's pretty neat. And for the Docker stuff, we're just using the Windows Docker GUI to enable WSL integration. You come over to your like cogwheel and you just check all the WSL2 boxes, and that'll let you run your Docker commands down here. So right now I actually have a Docker instance running with this container, which is how I'm doing the searching. So I can come in here and just do a Docker PS. I can grab this ID, and then we can do a Docker stop for this ID, I think, and that should stop it. Now if we do a Docker PS, that should be cleared. Alternatively, you can just come into your Windows stuff. I think we can go over, or we hit cancel maybe. You can come over here, click the little trash button, and then hit delete forever, and then you're good to go there. Either one works. You know, the GUI is nice sometimes, but you know, it really depends what you want to do. But okay, I already have the video app made, so we're just going to pop into here. I just called it a video app because it's an app for video. We're not actually doing anything video related. And I'm going to leave these notes over to the side of the screen so that I can look at them and pretend that I know what I'm talking about. We're going to go ahead and move over the VS Code. And now let's start by just adding in the Searchkick stuff. So if we come over to the GitHub page for Searchkick, and we find the section somewhere up here where the installation settings are, we want to add the gem for Searchkick. So let's come into our gem file, hit Control+, scroll down to the bottom. We just want to put in the Searchkick gem, and then we want to put in the Elasticsearch gem. We want to make sure the Elasticsearch gem matches the version that we're going to be using for our Docker container, which it looks like is around this version. So what I'm going to do is hope that GitHub Copilot knows how to grab this, and it should tell us like 1.15 or something. But in the case of the email, it looks like it's actually like 1.17.8. So we can use that, and let's see what GitHub Copilot has. Rails 7.0.4, cool. And then let's see, there we go, 1.17.8. So we'll go ahead and we'll save that. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and do a bundle install. I don't think we need to do any sort of migrations here, but the 1.17.8 is wrong. This needs to be .7. And we can save that and run a bundle install again, and hopefully that works. Looks like it did. Now let's do a Rails G scaffold post with a title and a body of type text, just so we have something to play with. We can do a Rails DB:migrate and a Rails S afterwards to start our server. Next, let's come over to our Explorer, our app, our models, our post.rb. Let's add in the Searchkick stuff. Let's just do all of our searching. Next, if you do have any posts, you are going to need to do a reindex. So to do the reindex, we need to actually have the Docker container running. So let's go ahead and stop the server, and let's get the Docker container up and running. To do this, we run a couple commands. Let me go ahead and full screen this. The first command is going to be let me see. It's going to be a Docker run -d. We then have a -p, where we set the IP to be 127.0.0.1, of course, and then we bind it to 9200. We then do something similar with a -p for 9300. We set the discovery type to be single node. We set the Docker version that we want to use for Elasticsearch to be 7.17.8. Hopefully this is the entire command here. Looks like that worked. And follow step 2, which is to check if this is working. We can curl the local host, which is what this is, port 9200. And we can curl it in here. And because we're passing the port through to the Docker container, that should work. But in this case, it didn't. So that's interesting. Not entirely sure why that didn't work. Let's come over to the Docker image. It looks like it says it started. So let's try it again, maybe. There we go. Okay, so we just had to wait a bit. So now curling it gives us that response that we expect to see. And we saw a similar response over here when we went to the actual website last time where we had that JSON right here, which it looks like that's working. So that's pretty cool. That means we can also come into our Rails app. Let's do a Rails C, and then let's do a post.create. We'll say this needs to be for the title, which will just be the words test, and the body will be the words case. Go ahead and do that. Cool. Now let's do a capital P post.reindex to see if this is working. So it looks like that was imported just fine. Now we can hit Control D to exit out of here. We can do a Rails G controller. We'll call it the search controller and give it a index action. And let's go ahead and do a Rails S. Let's come over to our routes, which is in our config and routes.rb. Let's change this get to a post. Let me hit Control plus to make sure we can see this. We want to get this to just the search path, and then we'll set this to be the search controller, and we call this the index action. Next, let's come into the search controller. We can open up the side panel, scroll up to app controller, search controller. We have the index action right here. Inside of this index action, we need to make sure that we are doing our searches just like last time. Doing the searches is just going to be, let me actually full screen this. You're going to have at post set it equal to a post.search. You pass in params where you are doing the search params. And then we need to pass in the fields we're going to be searching, which in this case are the title and the body. Then we can do our search to make sure that if we go into the search bar, leave it empty, and we hit enter, this should take us not to the next page. It should take us to the page with all of the posts being listed. For that, we can just do a check and say if the params for search are blank, then we want to just search for the asterisk, which will return all results. So if we have an empty search bar, we'll just return everything. The next step inside of here is going to be to do the turbo respond. So we can say respond to do format. We'll have one for HTML, and we'll have one for the turbo stream actually. So for that one, we can get rid of this. We'll say format.turbostream do, and then we can do an end down here. For the turbo stream, we want to render the turbo stream. We then want to do the turbostream.update, and we want to update the div with an ID of post, which we'll cover in a second. We want to do the partial for the posts, and then we want to pass in the locals. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at what this actually does. Of course, we always have the target. This is the thing we're updating, so the div or the turbo frame that we're updating. We can come over to our views, our posts, and our index page right here. We can grab this loop right here, and we'll refactor this into a render to posts/posts, which will be our partial. We'll pass in the posts, which will be our at posts. So this is going to allow us to replace everything inside of this div with an ID. When we say do the update, it'll update whatever's inside of this div, which will be this entire post partial with all of our looping. We can come in here, do a underscore post.html.erb. We can paste this in. This will now be where we have our loop happening. It's just a little bit cleaner, and it lets us replace it just fine. We can save the index page. We can come over here. The next thing is we have the partial, which is our post partial, and then we have our locals, which we're setting right up here, and then we're just passing these in. So that's cool. But let's do our search form real quick. For that, we can just do a render for search/form, and we can, well, I guess we don't have to pass anything in. We can come in here, we can do a new folder, call this search. We already have a search form. Let's come in here, do a new file, call this underscore form.html.erb. And for this search form, we're just going to do something very similar to what we did last time, which is going to be a form width for the URL, which is our search path. In our routes, we set the search path right here to be the search. So it's /search, and then that goes to the search controller index action, which is what we're doing right here. So that's our URL. We then have a method of post because we set this to be a post request, and then we have a remote true because it's doing it remotely. And the remote true means skip the HTML and do the turbo stream instead. Then we just grab the text field and the label for the search parameter that we're passing back. That then gives us our search form. Let's come over to the post page. We are now looking at the one post that we have really. So let's actually, I guess we can just do this in the console actually, or on the website. Let's do a Rails S again. Let's come over here, refresh the page. Let's come in, do test. We'll do 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. Go ahead and create that. And then let's do one more where we do, I don't know, the word apples and bananas. Works for me. And then we can do one last one where we just have the word test in case again. So we have 2 of those posts. Now let's test this. We can search for test. We get back the 2 tests. We can search for case. We get back those 2. We can search for 1, 2, 3. We get this result. We can backspace out of here, get all of them. We can search for 4, 5, 6 just to make sure that's working. And let's search for apple. That gives us our apples and bananas. And you can see we have all of that working, and it's actually running through this Elasticsearch that exists inside of that Docker container. So this will be a universal setup for you. And we actually managed to cover this a lot more quickly than the previous video. Thankfully, the good people of the internet know far more than I do. I'm just here to spread the good word. Docker is a godsend if you have like a use case similar to this where you just need a system that exists behind like a port somewhere. Always fantastic to have Docker in that situation. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you again to Alexander for the email. That was very, very helpful. Definitely going to save a lot of time. Probably going to use this in future videos as well. The other thing to cover real quick is that you can stop this container either through the command here or the GUI, or you can do it based on the ID like you saw earlier. And you can also find out which ones are running by doing a specific Docker PS command, which is going to be your Docker PS-A-F status equals running, which will show you which ones are running. So this one right here, you can see this one with an ID of whatever has been up for 7 minutes. This is what it's running under, which is port 9200 and 9300. And it is the Hardcore Allen is its name. You can also see when it was created. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was interesting. And hopefully I will see you in the next video.